Pozdrav dragi narode, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Slobodni. Današnja tema je vrlo zanimljiva i aktualna u cijeloj Europi i u cijelom svijetu, a to je zaštita okoliša i klimatske promjene. Tako sam i ovaj put imao čast ugostiti damu koja zna puno o tome, koja piše o tome i danas ćemo razgovarati i da vas informiramo o tome što se događa u svijetu, posebno u Sjedinjenim državama. Moja gošća je gospođa Elizabeth Nickson. Hello, Elizabeth. Welcome to our show in Croatia.
I'm very happy to be here.
I'm glad. Can you tell us a few words about yourself and your work?
All right. I'm a journalist, and I have been for 3 decades. I started at Time magazine in London, and I worked in London and New York and Europe and Paris, and for 25 years. And then I moved home to the country because my mother needed help. And I began writing about the environmental movement because that was what was happening out here. I live in a node of the environmental movement where many of the leaders live and where they have effected many of their experiments. And I want to preface everything I say by telling you that everything that they try fails. And in my province, which was left-wing for most of its history, is now about to elect a right-wing government that will promise to overturn what has happened here. Where I live, we have the largest industrial forest in the world. And the Greens shut it down throughout the 1980s and stopped our forest by 90%. The province immediately went into a deep recession, and the way the provincial leaders decided to make money was they started casinos. We have a very large Asian population in British Columbia, and what happened was Asian gangs, the triads, and Chinese, South Asian, Japanese, all moved into the city, and we started to launder all of the drug money from North America through our casinos and our real estate. So we have basically turned our city, Vancouver, it's crime-ridden. It's so upsetting to look at. My family moved out here in the 1880s, and they built much of the early infrastructure. And for 100 years, it was a quiet Christian city. And now it's an international city, and it runs on crime. So that's what's happened out here.
Yeah. And, what do you think? What is the reason they have this kind of policy?
I think that it's run very much from the top of the culture, from the wealthiest people who believe there are too many people on Earth and we have to reduce the population and reduce human activity. Out of that belief came the climate change madness. And I'm writing about this right now in my part of the world, in North America. It's the Rockefellers who had literally billions of dollars to spend on this, to create all the institutions, to bring all the scientists under their wing and just basically pay them to lie. The climate has not appreciably changed here since I was a kid. There is literally no hardcore evidence that the climate is changing. However, climate change mitigation regulation has been built into every single business and industry so that it acts to suppress activity and, most importantly, suppress economic activity. So families can't build themselves, they can't build wealth. Our housing now has been so restricted that the price has shot up. Houses that would ordinarily be worth $500,000 are now worth $4 million. And that is a result of climate change mitigation legislation built into every single legislative act over the last, I would say, 30 years. It's terrible. I mean, I certainly appreciate what's happening to Croatia because I watched the results of it happen here. And when I say it happened here, it happens everywhere. All through, when I wrote Eko-Fascists, the book that you read, I traveled 20,000 miles through the states, the United States, and I talked to ranchers, farmers, loggers, small town mayors, county attorneys, local business people, and they all pointed to the destruction of their towns to this one thing, which is green regulation and climate change mitigation regulation. It was built in order to suppress activity. The only way that you can save the climate and stop CO2 emissions is by suppressing economic activity.
Yeah.
So that's what's happened.
Yeah. Well, we have a same policy in Europe. And this policy telling that we need to decarbonize all our economy. What does it mean, decarbonize economy?
No, it's very simple. To decarbonize anything, you've just got to shut it down. I mean, that's how you do it. For instance, here, this poor man was trying to expand his marina. Well, we get a lot of yachts and ships in all summer, like hundreds and hundreds of them. We have a very ramshackle harbor. It's very beautiful, but people come here because it is beautiful. There are no services. There's no restaurant. There's no hotel. There's no entertainment. This man spent $1 million and 20 years trying to expand his docks, and he failed. Now, the reason he failed was that individuals in the community got up at meetings over those 10 years and complained that he was going to create more CO2 because there would be more activity. It's such a basic equation. If you create economic activity, you create carbon emissions because the more activity, the more CO2. Yeah. Energy is off gases, CO2. So, what they've done in Canada over the last 10 years with this absolutely appalling prime minister, who everybody in the country, he is more hated than any other prime minister in our 200-year history. He is loathed. He can't go anywhere because people, they shout at him, they gather, they pick at him. He is yelled at where he has to stay in his house or in the parliamentary buildings. He cannot go anywhere because what he's done, he's made energy in the country so expensive that people have to choose between paying rent and heating their houses. And Canada is very, very cold. So you have to heat your house. But energy costs have tripled. They've tripled over the last 10 years because of climate change regulation. So it couldn't be more simple, frankly.
Yes, I understand, but it's strange that you elected him again in the middle of pandemic. How this happened? You said that he is really, unpopular, but you elected him again.
Well, we have a bifurcated legislature. So the Conservatives won the popular vote, but the federal Liberals went into coalition with the Socialists, which are called the NDP, and they became a majority. I mean, every time he goes to the electorate, he loses more seats. But when he did that during the pandemic in 2021, he signed the death warrant of both the NDP and the federal Liberals, because right after that came the trucker convoy that went across the country, and every single Canadian that wasn't in government supported that convoy. So, also, they bundle votes. They steal votes from immigrant communities. I know that happens in every Western democracy, but how it happens in my country is that immigrants tend to cluster in certain neighborhoods. They have natural leaders who broker arrangements with the government in order to pay for housing, to pay for healthcare, to pay for education. And those leaders bundle votes for the Liberal Party. And we have a lot of evidence of that, that is how he slithered into power one more time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a lot of scientists in the world who are saying that this climate change policy, exactly emergency, doesn't exist. But there is another one who is saying that we have to panic because we need to do something immediately. But they are now leading policy because decisions from the side of the European Union, same thing in Canada and the United States, they are fighting hard and invest lots of money in decarbonization. What do you think? What is happening? Who is right? Well, can be both sides.
Well, Judith Curry, I think, is the most coherent on this, and you had her on just recently. She just pushes forward the many, many uncertainties within the so-called science of climate change, which I think is entirely corrupt and wrong. And even, as she said on your show, even the IPCC says that it is not an urgent problem, but politically it's so powerful, scaring people is so powerful that it just overwhelms any rational thought. I mean, there have been many, many Nobel Prize winning physicists and scientists who have come out and said, this is not a problem. We do not see this as an urgent, something that we should watch, but it's not urgent. We should not be spending trillions of dollars on something that is simply not established. It's just politically very expedient for left of center parties to grab this and make it real. It's just like the pandemic, when they blew up fake science and scared everybody to death and got them all to take experimental gene therapy shots. It's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, we recognize pattern. It's the same pattern. Okay, you're also investigating about what they're planning to do on the financial sector concerning our natural wealth and climate changes. Can you tell us about this?
Yes. So you know about the United Nations 2030 plan, I think.
Agenda 2030, yes.
Yeah. So Agenda 2030 says that 30% of the lands of every country has to be put into conservation. And in the States, they are advancing on that handily. In Canada, we have about 90% of our landmass is undeveloped. In fact, only 6% of Canada is developed. But nevertheless, they are taking 30% of that land and putting it off limits to any human activity or use. If there's a mine there, or if there's a forest or anything, it has to be no use. As an aside, what I discovered when I researched eco-fascists, that all land which is left untouched tends to degrade. Rangelands they run to desert almost immediately. Forests, they begin to build fire ladders up the trees, and trees grow so closely together that they become desiccated and they explode in fire. Most of the fires that we've seen in North America, and I believe Russia, over the last 15 years, are caused by green forest mismanagement. Greens have placed these forests off limits. They don't tend them. They don't clear out underbrush. They don't thin the trees. And so therefore the trees explode in fire. The fires are so intense that they desiccate the earth, and they're called canopy fires. They just spread, and we've lost hundreds of millions of acres to green forestry management in Canada and the US. So I just want to make that clear, that when you take land and you bank it the way these people mean to do, the land starts to degrade. So what their plan is that they've assigned a value to the lands of the United States. I know you call it America, so I'm stumbling, but the United States. Mm-hmm. And they've decided it's worth $100 trillion. So 30% of that land that's being set aside will be sold to investors, and the asset will be called a natural asset class. And that land and the products of that land will be monetized. And when I say products, I mean by setting that 30% of land aside, that would be a third of 2 billion acres. So that's a third of 2 billion acres that'll be set aside to rot. They will consider that a carbon sink, and it will be financialized. So that $30 trillion will be an asset for people to trade on the exchange, because it will act as a get out of jail free, as a tax rebate, as a tax a deduction for all their other activities. So they can build, they can mine, they can we need gas and oil. They can dig for gas and oil, but these 30%, these 750 million acres will act as a tax deduction for the entrepreneurial class and for the American stock market. Well, I'm not explaining that well, but you can kind of see it in terms of an income tax form. Your income is the $100 million, but you've got a carbon credit of $300 million, so you can just deduct that from your profits. So you don't have to pay taxes on that.
I understand. Can you tell us what is carbon credit? You mentioned carbon credit, and people are not aware of it.
Well, if that land is not being used, it's not emitting emitting CO2, so it's a carbon sink. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so irrational that it's hard to explain. If that land was being logged, mined, ranched, or farmed, it would create CO2. If it is not being mined, ranched, logged, or farmed, it is a carbon sink. Mm-hmm. So the people who trade that land can claim it as a tax deduction. So that's what they're trading. They're trading a tax deduction. Yeah. I mean, there's no better way to explain it. And then the land itself becomes traded. So as climate change regulations mount, as they are planned to do, I mean, 2050, Agenda 2050 means 50% of all land is going to be placed off limits. And Agenda 2090, which exists at the UN, means that 90% of all of the land in all of the world will be placed off limits to humans. And we will live in these very, very tightly controlled mega cities where everything will be tracked, measured, and monetized. That's why the American stock market right now, 90% of the profits in the market are from digital companies who are planning to do this. Mm-hmm.
I had one guest. He's a Silicon Valley whistleblower. He explained me that they are doing now this metaverse. Exactly, they are measuring all planet and they want to put it in digital format. And he thinks also that they are doing this because they want to prepare for this, what you are saying telling us now.
Yes, so you can travel inside your mind instead of actually traveling. Yeah, yeah, it's fiendish. I think it's fiendish.
Okay. You wrote also one article, and you explained that in the New York Stock Exchange, they are now building up a new company named National Assets Company, and they will trade it. They will publish it stocks there. Can you tell us about this?
Well, yes. What they're going to do to the 30, 50, and 90% of the land that's set aside is they're going to evaluate how much air, clean air, clean water, fertile land, and so on is worth. And then they're going to sell that back to us as a tax on our life. So depending on how much food you eat, how much water you use, how much air you breathe, everybody will get an allowance for all of these things, which will be sold to them by natural asset companies. In these highly monitored megacities that by 2090 they project us all to be living in. So
I'll repeat. They're planning until 2090 that we all live in 10% of the planet in the big cities, and they will rent to us air, water, whatever we need. Exactly, they will rent to us and give us as a credit.
Yeah, food, everything will be measured and monitored by Silicon Valley.
Yeah. That means again, small group of people will use everything, and they will have everything, and all others will be some like slaves to them. Okay. You also mentioned that there will be public offer of this company at the end of this year. I think October, November.
I would imagine that the Biden administration is going to approve this law. People are fighting it, so I'm not quite sure whether it's going to go through immediately. But I found that with this legislation, this kind of legislation, if it fails because of public protests, they just pause and they come back at it. So I don't know whether it's going to be by the end of 2024, but 2025, 2026, definitely. I think they don't really know how else to retire the national debt of the U.S., which is $34 trillion and costs $1 trillion a year to service in interest payments.
They're now looking for a new way to monetize their national wealth to repay back their debts.
Yeah.
Tell me, what do you think? I think the Trump administration was against this climate changes policy, and I think they pulled back from this Paris Agreement. What will happen in case that Trump wins in the United States?
Well, I think all of this will be put on hold until they can figure out a way around him. Trump is very aware. One of the great things about Trump is that he's worked in the real world in construction, so he understands the way legislation affects economic activity. So that, I mean, the heads of the Department of Interior who oversee all of America's land and water and forests and oceans and everything, immediately that activity was allowed. And that is why during the Trump presidency, we had an economic boom. And for the first time since the 70s, the income of the lower 50% went up, and it went up every single year. As soon as Biden was elected, it collapsed, and people are even more desperate than they were pre-Biden. And when I say desperate, I mean desperate. We are being turned deliberately into third world countries. Outside of the big gleaming cities, it's a catastrophe. There's more abandoned buildings. There's so much poverty, and it just increases by the year.
Can you tell us
And it's because of this green idea. It is entirely the fault of the green regime.
Can you tell us example? I saw in your book that you put examples of California because you went there, and how they destroy California with these green regulations.
Yes, that was heartbreaking. The California basin creates $20 billion worth of food every year. It's so rich. It's naturally watered. Most of America's fruit comes from there, many of its vegetables. It's a hugely fertile basin. And they started shutting down the water there because of a small sucker fish that they felt to be endangered. And this is how powerful the lobby is. They started to take out dams. And by the time I finished my research, they had taken out 1,000 significant dams out of the American West. So west of the Mississippi, it's watered by two great rivers, principally the Columbia. And the headwaters of the Columbia run all the way from the Canadian border down to California. So in that headwaters, they started taking out dams. They break them. Every time they took out a dam, another town failed and another ranch failed, so that this magnificent fertile valley has been 80% of it was destroyed. And people were living in tents and in shelters, and I mean, it was tragic and so completely unnecessary. They would bring in legislators from Sacramento, which is the capital of California. They'd show them what was happening. They'd show them that all of the science was based on falsity. And the legislators would go back and they would vote with the Sierra Club every single time. When the ranchers would phone the legislator and say what happened, he said, if I vote against them, the Sierra Club will ruin me. I will not be reelected. That's how powerful the regime is in the U.S.
Mm. Well, I also had a guest, Joe Gebbia. He explained me that there is a big influence from side of China. And when you see now, there is a decarbonization of Europe, European Union, United States, Canada, because this policy is lasting already for decades. But there is an increasing of carbonization in, for example, China and India. And, well, we are on the same planet. And does it have any sense if somebody reduces carbon and other part of the world are producing more? What is the policy? I don't understand this.
Well, it's insane. That's what it is. I think that the New World Order, as this is properly called, is meant to stand up India and China as power centers under the control of the New World Order. So they are being allowed to develop and to produce all of the goods that we use over in North America and Europe until I don't know what their end game is with those countries. I know that China is moving into Africa and is starting to industrialize Africa. And I would imagine that as they draw down the population, because a lot of this is about drawing down population. They want to reduce the population, and they will do it by any means necessary. And in fact, birth rate stats show that in about 50 years, we're looking at maybe a third less people, just because women aren't having children, largely because of feminism, feminist ideology, and depopulation propaganda has been just beaten into all of us, that we all think there are too many people. There are not too many people. The world could have many, many millions of more people properly housed, properly fed, properly watered, doing wonderful things. But this idea, this neo-Malthusian idea of depopulation, has infiltrated our leadership class across the world to the point where they are planning for 1/3 fewer people by 2090. And then we will all be in these cities where we'll be monitored and tracked. So I would imagine by then they plan to draw down the economic industrial activity of India and China. But right now, North America and Europe, because we're so developed and our populations are so educated, we're the test case. We're the ones they have to ruin first.
Yeah, we are the biggest enemy because we understand what is happening. Can you tell me, you mentioned feminism as a movement. That means this woke ideology, what is coming also in Europe and in Croatia, has some purpose, and purpose is to reduce population in the world. Can you explain us this?
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's 100% to destroy the family, destroy community, destroy when I traveled throughout the West, every town is riven by conflict. The small cities and towns and villages and townships of North America often have a green contingent that has moved in, and what they do is they cause trouble. They set person against person, family against family. They overwhelm the weak-minded with this ideology that there are too many people on the planet. Woke ideology acts the same way in cities and in universities. It attempts to propagandize the young and show them that the world is filled with hate. Everybody hates the marginal. It's completely false. They take in the North American Indian. Everybody hates North American Indians. My family, we married into 4 Indian tribes in the 17, 18, and 1900s. All of that is just, it's made up hate. It's planned, it's orchestrated, and it's directed at the most gentle members of the culture. And I include women in that. They believe that, there's too many people and they should have fewer children, if not having children at all is a good thing. It's a sacrificial thing. It's devious because it understands human psychology very well.
Yeah, they have one parole. They said inclusivity and equality and diversity. This equality means that more equal women has to be to men by earning and also by employment. But if it's behind is something like you said, depopulation, that means they want to destroy a family because there is no children without women.
That's right. Yeah, and over here there's a very strong movement against that. Young women are asking themselves, do I want to work for a large corporation for the rest of my life, or do I want to have a home and a family and children and chickens and a farmyard? It's a complete splitting off from this ideology. And in fact, everywhere I look, I see so many signs of hope, because having been propagandized and bullied by these ideas for so many years, people are just starting to say, no, I don't want to live like that. I'm not that person. I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing accounting for, some company listed on the New York Stock Exchange who doesn't care a bit about me, so what? It means nothing. So the choice is becoming corrupted. People are seeing through it here. But then we've been bullied by it for, 25 years? Easily.
Can you tell us how you've been bullied from this ideology?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, through everything, through literature, through magazine articles, through the media, principally through Hollywood and television, and all of that stuff really comes out of institutions that have decided that this is the way they want people to behave. I've done a fair amount of work on what's called over here MK Ultra, which is mass brainwashing operations, which started in the 1950s and came out of the Tavistock Clinic in London, who decided that feminism was the way to go with women, and the whole ball of wax, the entire confluence of stupid ideas had to be propagated throughout the culture. So every publisher, every media, every Hollywood film studio pushes these ideas forward as if their lives depended on it. And in fact, for financing, their lives do depend on it. You can't publish, the fact that my book, Eko-Fascist, was published by HarperCollins, which is one of the 5 biggest publishers in the world, was a miracle. And the only reason that happened was that my editor, Adam Bellow, was the son of a Nobel Prize-winning author, Saul Bellow. So he was allowed some leeway. Our publishers are completely bought in to the ideology of the New World Order, and every book they publish services the New World Order.
You mentioned that you went deep in this MK Ultra project. Can you tell us some examples of this, implementing this project in the last years? Because this is a very interesting thing.
It is fascinating. MK Ultra grew out of the Nuremberg trials when Alan Dulles, who was head of the CIA and of OSS during the Second World War, went over and with a psychiatrist called Ewan Cameron to investigate whether Hesse was capable of standing trial. They then went through all of the records of the Holocaust doctors and went into their labs and read all their papers and discovered what the experiments they were running were. And then they imported them into the United States. And the program was created under this headline, which means nothing. It's MK Ultra. It had 150 sub-projects that ran throughout America and Canada. And it tried to create the structure of mind control. I can tell you about the sub-project that my mother was involved in, if you like.
Yes, please.
Okay, so it was called Sub-Project 68, and it was designed by this psychiatrist, Ewan Cameron, who went to Nuremberg with Alan Dulles, and it was funded in part by the CIA. It took place in a very grand old family house that was given to Ewan Cameron called Ravenscraig at the top of the mountain in Montreal, and it aimed to become the premier psychiatric hospital in North America. And Ewan Cameron ran on his mildly ill patients a set of experiments. My mother became his patient because she had postpartum depression. And I'm going to just explain what the basic experiment was. What they did was they tried to reduce their patients to an infantile level using drugs and sensory deprivation, in that they would blindfold them, they'd block their ears, they'd glove their hands, they'd immobilize them with curare or insulin in a hospital bed and leave them without human contact for days on end, at which point they would regress to infantile status. And then they would, it seems so primitive, but this is what they did. They put speakers in a football helmet, put the football helmet over the individual's head, and played for days on end a series of statements. Your mother doesn't love you, your father doesn't love you, your children don't love you, etc., 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 until this person completely collapsed. And then they would attempt to rebuild their mind. They would do the same thing. They put speakers, football helmet. You are a strong woman. You are able to do anything. You are competent and capable. It was just the very beginnings of mind control. In other places, and particularly in Stanford University, was the locus of a lot of this, along with the military hospitals in California. They attempted to create people that would murder on a cue. We believe that Charles Manson was one of those individuals, and that many of the serial killers in America were created by MKUltra as an attempt to create somebody who would kill given a cue, and that the Manson murders were a failed MKUltra experiment. We don't know a lot about it. Subproject 68, my mother's project, was thoroughly investigated. We know exactly what happened. We know who paid for it. We know everything about it because we have launched multiple lawsuits against the CIA, against the hospital, against the university under which the hospital was supposedly controlled, and the Canadian government. And every single time we've won those lawsuits because the fact of the matter was that they did illegally experiment on mildly ill patients.
And you wrote a book about this, where we can find this book. It was from 2012.
The book about the MKUltra experiments is called The Monkey Puzzle Tree, and you can buy it on Amazon.
Great. And also your book, Eko-Fašist, is also on Amazon, and I strongly recommend to everybody to read it and to see in detail what we are talking right now. Well, for sure, to implement all of these things, this eco-ideology, they need compliance from the people. What are your suggestions to people how to fight against it if they don't want to comply?
Well, it's very hard because every town that you go into has been taken over by this. I mean, not every town, but many towns. Any town that is near a resource, any town that is near a park, any holiday town, any beautiful town, they have all been taken over by the green agenda. And by which that all of the plans and regulations and rules that fall from those regulations have been written essentially by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. Right. So they follow all of those goals. So in order to fight back, some of the states in the U.S. are outlawing all UN regulation, and anything that comes out of the World Economic Forum has been officially outlawed. No town or city is allowed to use any of those legislation templates in their planning and operation of their city, because what they've done through the UN is they have written stacks of regulation, and all a planner, whether it's a local planner, a city planner, a regional planner, has to do is just to import these regulations and drop them into the city or town or region. They are a one-size-fits-all. They take no consideration of the individuals in that town, of the families, of the businesses that have been operating for decades, if not hundreds of years. All of those are just crushed under the UN regulatory structure. So in order to understand what's happening, you should read my book. There are many books written about it. And then you have to form a group and take it on. We've managed to turn back some of it here. We had a 2050 plan imposed on the island that I live on. They tried to do it 2 years ago, and we fought back. The planner was fired, and so were the trustees. It's come back, of course, because people, they don't take it seriously enough now. But I have to say that in Canada and in the US, there are a great many people are now awake to this. They know what's happening. They disagree with it. They set their faces against it, and they are fighting. It's early days yet, but I don't think there's going to be a Liberal government in Canada for another 50 years. They're so hated. These plans are hated. Once they start to operate, when they grind into a city and they start to spread out, people dislike them so much that they wake up out of their media trance, out of TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, and they start to fight back. And it's almost axiomatic. These plans are artificial, they're based on false science, and everybody hates them.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you for your work, for your books. These books are very important because people need to know. And after they know, after they are aware, maybe they can organize themselves and push back. And I wish you all the best in Canada, and I hope on the next elections you will find a better solution than now.
I do too, and good luck to you in Croatia.
Thank you.
Okay.
Evo, dragi narode, evo još jedan put otvaram ovu temu. Dakle, kao što ste čuli, po cijelom svijetu pričaju o agendi 2030. U Hrvatskoj naravno ne. Međutim, ono što je važno za Hrvatsku znati jeste da smo mi se u Hrvatskoj obavezali ispunjavati uvjete agende 2030, to je 17 ciljeva održivog razvoja. Možete već sada vidjeti neke od naših ministara kako nose one bedževe, one okrugle sa bojama. To vam je oznaka odanosti agendi 2030. Danas ste imali prilike, pored ostalih, čuti pozadinu što planiraju s tim napraviti i koji im je krajnji cilj. Također ste vidjeli u nekim mojih emisijama kao što je emisija o stakeholder kapitalizmu, gdje Svjetski ekonomski forum implementira novi oblik društveno-ekonomskog uređenja kojeg naziva stakeholder kapitalizam, ja sam ga nazvao stakeholder komunizam, koji sadržava sve ove ciljeve. A ono što je važno, u programu oporavka i otpornosti hrvatske vlade stoje upravo ti ciljevi. Ispod svakog cilja, svakog područja stoji dekarbonizacija, klimatske promjene, digitalizacija. Dakle, i naša vlada vjerno slijedi ovaj put koji je, kao što ste primijetili, možda popločan dobrim namjerama, bar formalno, ali čini se da vodi u neki pakao u kome ćemo potpuno ostati bez slobode kako bi zaštitili planet za kojeg ne znam uopće da li im treba zaštita. Mnogi znanstvenici kažu da ne treba, a mnogi koji su očigledno i zainteresirane strane kažu da pod hitno moramo nešto učiniti. I novac za koji se Europska unija zadužila za 806 milijardi po sadašnjim cijenama, 56% tog novca mora odići za digitalizaciju i za dekarbonizaciju. Prema tome, ta će se politika provoditi u Hrvatskoj. Znamo da na čelu grada Zagreba je također čovjek koji misli o klimatskim promjenama i o tome kako Zagreb treba postati 15-minutni grad. I o tome sam emisiju napravio, pa sami pogledajte što to znači. Ono što je meni cilj, pozvavši ovakve goste koji su upućeni, koji su istraživali, pisali knjige, koje su dostupne i vama, i toplo ih preporučam, jeste da vas osvijestim. Da budete svjesni o tome što nam se sprema i što se ovog trenutka događa. Ako smo pristali na to, I ako smo znali da nam takvu politiku nude, onda je sve u redu. Međutim, ako smo mi pristali na nešto drugo, a ovo nam serviraju, onda je važno da se osvijestimo, da odlučimo da li ćemo i dalje ići tim putem ili ćemo jednostavno odbiti te politike kao što ste vidjeli da to rade i u drugim zemljama. Ja ću nastaviti dalje, naravno, otvarati ove teme i smatram da su važne. Kao što vidite, povezano sa sve onim što se događalo protekle 4 godine, što se događa danas i što možemo očekivati u sljedećem razdoblju, jer su svi obrasci isti ljudi, iste politike stoje iza svega, a na nama je da shvatimo, prihvatimo, nastavimo ili se odupremo. Hvala vam lijepo na pažnji i uskoro se vidimo u idućoj epizodi Slobodnog.